Hello, welcome to our Facebook Live presentation, Navigating the Challenges of Caregiving, the Legal and Financial Aspects. I'm Kurt Miller, Director of Public Relations for Brook Lane. Today's program is the fourth program in our Caregiver series, sponsored by Brook Lane and Potomac Case Management Services. This is in recognition of November being National Family Caregivers Month. For information on upcoming programs, please visit brooklane.org. You will also find recordings of our Facebook Live presentations that are in the series on our YouTube channel, as well as presentations for other mental health topics. If you have questions during the program today, please type them into the comments area and I will relay them to the speakers. We appreciate your being here and thank you for joining us. The title of today's program is Navigating the Challenges of Caregiving, the Legal and Financial Aspects. It is a panel discussion and it's moderated by Dawn Johns, the Executive Director of Potomac Case Management. She has provided leadership to the organization there since 2008, and during her time there, Potomac Case Management has expanded from Washington County into Allegheny County, Carroll County, and Frederick counties. Dawn has a medical background in oncology, geriatrics, and end-of-life care. Her experience of caring for individuals with illnesses formulated her passion for supporting caregivers. Dawn views caregiving as both a tremendous challenge and a reward, whereby if we create environments that support caregivers, it can tip the scales to more positive experiences and memorable rewards. Welcome, Dawn, and thank you for moderating today's program.
Oh, thank you, Kurt, and we definitely appreciate the opportunity. I know so many caregivers over these last 2 years have been isolated and really trying to navigate all these things alone. So Brook Lane bringing these Facebook Live presentations hopefully are reaching people out there that really have needed the information. I'm really happy today to be able to bring two experts along on this journey with us, and just to think about for the viewers, what a asset to be able to get this free advice, if you will, from these experts in two really critical matters that we see in end-of-life care, aging care, and just caregiving in general. Is first, we have Jeannie Singer with us. Jeannie is a CPA and an attorney. She focuses mainly on tax and estate planning, and she creates estate plans for clients that include wills, trusts, powers of attorney, and life insurance trusts. So welcome, Jeannie. And for the viewers, she's going to get into a lot of those more formal documents that are vitally important that you have. So I hope you're going to be taking notes. Also with us, Cynthia Moore. Cynthia is a CPA at Solcheck & Moore. She's the VP there and CFO. She has extensive expertise in taxation and accounting for estates and trusts, and leads the CPA Elder Care Financial Division, assisting older adults with special needs. So welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you.
So we're going to get right into this today, just because I feel like it's a really packed edition of the Facebook Lives that we're presenting for caregivers this month. And really have you, Jeannie, if you would, dissect from that 30,000-foot view, the informed consents, power of attorneys, advanced directives, DNRs, the MOST form, and anything else that you really feel caregivers, and not just caregivers, I mean, you know, people could be viewing this for themselves. Maybe they're, you know, a single older adult and they don't have family or a spouse, and they really want to get some of these things in line to make it easier down the road. So I'm just going to let you take it away and give us all some really great information.
All right. So to start with, these documents that I'm going to talk about, you should have in place well before you need to start being a caregiver for your family. I honestly think that anybody over the age of 18 needs to have a financial power of health and healthcare power of attorney. we were talking about my kids a little bit before we joined our audience today. Both of my kids got financial powers of attorney and healthcare powers of attorney for their 18th birthday, because I am just that cool of a mom. But once you turn 18, from a healthcare standpoint, nobody else can make medical decisions for you. Nobody can make financial decisions for you. And a lot of times when clients walk in my door, they anticipate that a spouse or adult children will automatically be able to step into that role for them. And that's not true. They need to actually have the documentation that will allow them to step up and serve in those roles. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the financial power of attorney. That gives an agent the ability to handle all of your financial affairs. And there's two kinds. There's a durable, which is effective when you sign it. So you don't have to be dependent by a doctor. You can delegate. And that's what happens with most of my clients. It's pretty rare that we have a doctor have to step up and say that a patient's incompetent. Usually our clients get to a point where they're just tired of doing it, and they essentially turn the checkbook over to their named agent, and then that person moves forward and takes care of things. The second is a springing power of attorney, which is effective only after the doctor says that you're incompetent. We very rarely do those, again, because it's difficult to get a doctor to sign off on that. And a lot of times clients think, well, I've got plenty of time, I'm in my 40s, I'm in my 50s, I'll sign those documents when I turn 80. And for okay, we go through that natural life progression and we don't need the documents before then. But life is full of surprises, and I've had clients in their 40s have strokes. I've had clients in their 40s end up in comas from weird infections. And thankfully we had those documents in place. But if you don't have a financial power of attorney in place and you become incapable of handling your financial affairs, there's no statutory default. Your family members will have to go to court to be appointed as your guardian to be able to handle things. And that's an already emotionally draining time, one more stress factor that is easily avoided. So for a lot of clients, I tell them, think about the financial power of attorney like your homeowner's insurance policy. We hope we're never going to need it, but if you have it, it's going to be expensive to fix, because we'll have that entire court process. And what 2020 has shown us is the courts aren't always going to be open and available for us when we need them. COVID, I thought I was a morbid estate planner, and 2020 taught me really morbid enough when doing some estate planning. At one point, I had mom, dad, and their son that was named as their alternate on their financial power of attorney, all on vents in the hospital. And son lives 8 states away. So sometimes if we name the son that's here, we'll go down to that second alternate because it's more likely, that all 3 of them are in the car together going out to dinner and there's an accident and that something happens. But, for a son that was 8 states away, it never occurred to me that I would need somebody behind him. So in a very emotionally trying time, the healthy brother was put in a more difficult spot because he was really unable to take care of some things that needed to be done for mom and dad because we didn't have that legal documentation in place. So again, financial power of attorney, if you're over 18, you should have one. If you're a Maryland resident and your power of attorney was done before 2010, most likely it's invalid. There was a significant law change in Maryland in 2010. The intent was not to invalidate all existing powers of attorney, but unfortunately the General Assembly tripped over themselves a little bit while making the update, and many pre-existing documents are no longer accepted by some of the banks or by the title companies. If you're a Pennsylvania resident, there was a similar change in 2016 that pretty much invalidated, they were a little bit more aggressive about invalidating prior documents. The counterpart to that is a healthcare power of attorney. You know, in Maryland, we break it down into two parts. So the first part, you name a healthcare agent who makes decisions for you in the event you're unable to. So the catastrophic type event. The second part is what everybody usually thinks about. It's the living will, where you get to say whether or not you want to be on a respirator or feeding tube, if you're terminal, if you're in a coma, if you have an end stage condition. You don't necessarily need to do both parts. You know, so when my 18-year-old kids signed their healthcare power of attorney, they just signed a document that named my husband and I as their agents. At 18, they weren't ready to do the living will part, and that was fine. You know, but once they turn 18, you know, we're not allowed as parents to talk to them about things. In most states have a default for that. So if you haven't done a healthcare power of attorney, you know, and I'll use Maryland as an example. Maryland's got a default for who they call your healthcare surrogates. And for a lot of families, that's okay. You know, the default under the statute is who you would pick to make your medical decisions anyway. That is not always the case. At one point, I was talking to a gentleman client. I had been doing work for him for 20 years. He's a little ornery. He didn't want to sign a healthcare power of attorney because he figures he's got decades yet and it's not going to be an issue. And he's got 3 adult kids. And I said, well, that's fine. You know, as long as you think the 3 kids as your default surrogates will be able to make decisions for you. You know, since you're not married, you don't have a spouse. You know, the spouse would be primary. He's like, oh no, I'm married. We've been separated for 30 years, but we just never want to go through the process of getting a divorce. And I said, well, then she's in charge of your health care. So we signed a healthcare power of attorney later that afternoon. It was one thing to not actually go through the financial expense of divorcing her. It was another thing to find out that she would be the one who would be making healthcare decisions for him. And for a lot of families, leaving the kids as the default as a group is not necessarily a good option. You know, I'm the oldest of 6. I love all my siblings dearly. We have not agreed on anything since 1972. My father refuses to sign a document because he's 83, but has decades yet to go. So he doesn't understand why we're worried about it. I'm like, all right, but just so you know, it's going to be a free-for-all.
I actually want to jump in here because that was a question I wanted to make sure that we covered whenever you mentioned about the gentleman with the 3 kids. And exactly, who gets to make that decision if there isn't a healthcare power of attorney? And if there is a healthcare power of attorney, does it need to say and or?
So for the financial power of attorney, it's really important if and or. Healthcare power of attorney, it's a little less important. If you say and, but one of the kids is from San Francisco and is in a plane flying home because you were rushed to the hospital, the doctor's not going to wait till they land and they're back within cell service again. They're going to talk to the child that they have in front of them. As soon as you land and you can call in, then they'll go back to and. But if they can only reach one, they'll do or
first.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, and I strongly recommend that clients consider skill sets when deciding among agents as opposed to age or gender. Even though, you know, to be slightly sexist, I've been doing this for 28 years. From a practical standpoint, the daughters almost always end up as the healthcare powers of attorney because we are more likely to be the ones that are going to the doctor's appointments and paying attention to that aspect of our parents' life. We do have a lot of clients that give the healthcare power of attorney, and in Maryland, it's called the Living Will and Advanced Medical Directive. That they get that confused with the Maryland Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment, the MOLST form. So the MOLST form used to be a do not resuscitate form. And I lose track of my years anymore, but I want to say it's been about 10 years ago that the General Assembly replaced the DNR with the MOLST form. And and made it much broader. So the old do not resuscitate form was really that, a do not resuscitate form. The new Maryland order for life-sustaining treatment gives you a broader range of options. And it covers everything. Do you want antibiotics? Do you want, if you're in a facility, do you want to be transferred to a hospital? Do you want blood transfusions? A whole range of things. It's a document that can only be done with a doctor, or a licensed medical provider. So a doctor or a nurse practitioner inside the practice. And another key difference for families to keep in mind, if the paramedics are called to the home and you have an advanced medical directive, paramedics don't even look at it. And in Maryland, there isn't a mandated form. On the Attorney General's website, they have a suggested form, but it's not a mandated form. And so them not looking at it is probably a good result, because, there's two of them. One of them has to drive. We don't medic taking the time to try and legally interpret a document that they've never seen before. We want them doing what they're trained to do. The most form, on the other hand, is a check the box option. So it's something very easy for the paramedics to hang on the wall of the ambulance, so that the paramedic that is treating you can be looking up and down at you and at the form to see what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. But particularly when the document was first enacted by Maryland, we had some families that had DNRs, and they were not grandfathered; they were just done, or they had advanced medical directives, and they were very upset that the paramedics, used life-saving procedures as their loved one was being transported to the hospital. But the paramedics had any choice at that point. All they could do was do what they're trained to do, and then hand you and your advanced medical directive off to staff at the hospital. Other documents that everybody should be thinking about that are a little less important from a caregiver standpoint in the short term, but you want to make sure that your family members have done an estate plan. And a lot of times clients say, well, I'm not Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. I don't need an estate plan. But even if you've only got $1, that's your estate, and you want, you worked hard for that dollar. We want to make sure that it's going where you want it to go. I'm probably one of the few attorneys that will tell you that you don't necessarily need a will as long as you have a plan. So for a lot of our widows, if they have one or two children, and particularly two children that get along, a lot of times we can get to the same spot with titling, that everything's payable on death to the beneficiary, so that we don't have probate. The will's less critical. If you've got 6 kids that haven't agreed on anything since 1972, it would be helpful to have a will. My dad still hasn't signed his, but but we're working on it. But again, less critical from a caregiver standpoint. For a caregiver really to be able to do everything that they need to do for their loved one, it's critically important that we have the financial power of attorney in play, and that they have access to medical records and have the ability to weigh in on those medical decisions. All right, so I think that takes me to my time. I told you I could talk forever on it.
You did great. I tell you, you really did walk us through these documents. One thing that I want to go back to before we move on is the financial power of attorney. And you mentioned about in the incident where, both parents ended up on a ventilator, the son ended up on a ventilator, and then you have to go through this. I would imagine going through court, there's quite a cost to this, isn't there?
There is, and you need multiple attorneys, because the court wants to, the individual for whom a guardian is going to be named has separate counsel to make sure that their best interests are being served. Then the person who is looking to be appointed as guardian also needs counsel. And it's not unheard of for there to be other family members that show up at court with their own lawyers saying that, it really should be them.
Yeah, I just wanted, go ahead.
With this one family, after about a week, we convinced the facility, the hospital that the son was in, he started to improve a little bit, enough so that we could have him sign a document naming the financial powers of attorney that I do give an agent the ability to appoint a successor, so that the sick son was able to appoint his brother to step up and serve during his illness. And that facility cooperated with us and provided a notary and a witness so that we could get that signed. So we had about a week of a lot of stress before we were able to get a document in place to give somebody the ability to step up and start handling things.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. I know I've been involved in a couple of these trickier cases myself, and you know, just for people to think about, well, I'm not there yet. I don't want to think about it yet. I don't want to do it yet. I think it is of value for them to hear. But if you don't, and something like this happens, it's going to come at a huge cost. So if you're concerned about saving money, you've now just ended up costing yourself or your estate or whomever a lot of money and undue stress, as you just said. I mean, that was a week of, you know, really strong stress. The other part of that is, you know, I again have seen this over the years where families just don't think about, yes, you've been cohabitating with this individual for the last 20 years, but you have no legal documents with this individual. And, you know, working with them through oncology, end of life care, and now in mental health as well, is really kind of saying to them, but you understand they're really not going to have a say here if something happens to you. I think that that's the other thing that sometimes people miss.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even just to say, as much, you know, because it's not unusual for the kids to be a little bit cranky in that situation, and for them to be trying to deny access in addition to not having a say. You know, so we want to make sure that we have documents that make it clear that at the very least they should be granted access, even if they're not granted a say.
Yeah.
And,
all right.
And just one last thing, and my apologies, Cindy, but when you're naming your agents, I tell clients to really think about it in that worst case scenario. You know, and think about it kind of in 5-year bites. You know, if I got hit by a bus in the next 5 years, who do I need to be doing this for me? Because that I mentioned before, I guess he was late 40s, ended up in a coma for 6 months, had named his 23-year-old son as his financial and his healthcare power of attorney. And thankfully there were uncles nearby that were able to give guidance and direction to the son. But clearly as soon as my client recovered, you know, we kind of updated the documents, recognizing that life can happen, and the 23-year-old doesn't necessarily have enough life experience just yet to be thrown into the deep end of the pool in a situation like that.
Yeah, this all gets very complicated very quickly sometimes. And I know even with the healthcare power of attorney, sometimes, you know, we have said to individuals, this might be your best friend. It might not be your daughter that lives in California. You know, not meaning that you're cutting your daughter in California out, but your best friend's there with you all the time. And so, yeah, it's really trying to have some of those difficult conversations. On Tuesday, I can remember the very first time that I walked in to my parents' home and I said, okay, let's talk about advanced directives. And they like were totally put off by that gesture of my goodwill of wanting to get this all taken care of. I think it is one of those things that we have to keep revisiting with family members when they put it off. And sometimes they have to hear the horror stories of other families before they do, you know, finally accept, okay, well, maybe since you do this all the time, you do know a little bit more about it than we do. Yeah. So just a great topic. So let's kind of change gears just a little bit and move over to you, Cynthia, with talking about some of these more, you know, the financial aspects to all of this the care that's going to happen, what kinds of things they need to have in place. If you do end up on a event, who's paying your bills for you if you know have never made those kinds of plans. So let's have you give us some guidance.
Certainly. I can give you a lot of experience here that I've had that when you're looking at managing somebody's assets, the main thing you need to do is try to consolidate those assets. You don't want to have 5 different banks, 3 different brokers. You've got some things in your safety deposit box, some things in your drawer. You need to make sure that all of those assets are kind of gathered together and put in as few accounts and as few places as possible, because it's going to make your life a whole lot easier in that respect. Yeah, I recommend 1 bank account, 1 investment account. If you have savings bonds, putting them in a safety deposit box, can be okay. Or there's ways to get things registered with the Department of Treasury, to make sure, that you don't have to worry about, the actual physical document. So, those sort of things are going to make life a whole lot easier. So if you can do that, that's great. Some of the things, so the first thing you're going to do is try to identify all of your assets or your loved one's assets. What do they have? Where are their bank accounts? How many different things do they have? Do they have a house? If they have a house, do we know where the deed is? If they have a car, do we know where the title is? Do they have those savings bonds in the savings safe deposit box? So you're going to be looking around. You're acting as a sleuth. I find it that I'm the detective, and I found very inventive ways to figure that out, because a lot of people that I have been brought in to help take care of their financial affairs, I don't have anybody to ask. They maybe are already incapacitated, or they can't really help me much. So my first place I'm going to look is I'm going to look on a tax return. Are they getting interest? Are they getting dividends? Okay. That's going to tell me where their bank accounts are, or if I can find the actual tax documents, the 1099s that they get. It's going to tell me if they have maybe an annuity out there someplace. And then I'm going to check their mail. If I can, I usually have their mail forwarded to me. And, that's really kind of taking over major. And some people don't want to do that. But if you can, you just get the mail forwarded to you, and you just start looking and seeing what statements are coming in. Oh, I got a statement from this bank. Oh, I got a statement from that annuity. Oh, they've got a pension over here. They're getting a check from, not direct deposit, but they're getting a check from so-and-so. So it gives you an idea of what's going on. And then you go through the process of, once you go through, you're getting these assets identified, you're going to make a list. Just because you got to get organized. Biggest thing, you got to get organized. So what do they have? Okay, they have bank account at such and such a bank. Here's the account number. If by chance they have any login information, or with your power of attorney, you take it to the bank and you create login information to be able to make sure you can go into a bank account electronically. It's a lot more helpful that way. So you're going to have a list with those things, everything they have that has any significant worth. If they've got a few little collectibles over, in their curio cabinet, no, don't worry about that. That's not what I'm talking. I'm talking the big things, the things that are worth something. And you make sure, again, to identify account numbers, what bank, passwords, logins, all that information. Again, you're going to try to find that title to the house. And how's it titled? Is it titled correctly? Or does it have a late husband's name still on it? Possibility. So you're just going to go through, look for these assets. The other thing you're going to look for is for debt. What kind of debt do they have? Do they have a mortgage? How about credit cards, car loan? So sometimes if you're looking at their bank account, that might give you a clue what kind of checks, what kind of disbursements have happened out of the checking account. That might give you, again, a clue of what is it they have out there. Statements coming in from different entities. You're going to think like, okay, here's the debt I've identified. So you want to make sure you do that. And again, writing down what account numbers, who they pay, maybe the monthly, payment, maybe some little specifics about that. So you know what's going on in that respect. So, you've got to make sure that you have taken control of their financial affairs fully if you really, really want to do it right. Now, I can tell you sometimes it's hard to get people to give up that control. My own mother, I love my mother dearly, but she and I argue a lot about, no, Mom, I'll take care of that. Don't worry about it. But she'll take care of it. And then things get, messed up once in a while, but that's okay. We deal with it. So make sure you try to keep, if the person is still capable, try to keep them maybe involved in some way. So they might be more apt to give up the control to you, to let you take the reins on that. And I can tell you sometimes it's hard. The credit cards, the one thing you might want to do is close all the credit card accounts. Normally when someone is at that stage, that age, you do not need a credit card. If you do, there's some sort of financial issue. Maybe there's other things that we can think of to do. If you need a card, something to be able to go out and make purchases for them, you can always have a debit card. Once you get things established with your financial power of attorney, taking it to the bank, you can have that debit card to help take care of those things. And you really don't need those credit cards floating around. Another thing you might want to do is you can actually, go on to Experian, and go in and look and see, what's out there as far as your credit report is concerned. But again, getting those credit cards closed, because what that does is it helps make sure they're not going to be someone taking advantage of them financially, because that is a big thing. I don't know how many people I have had that have been financially abused by not just strangers, but neighbors, kids, grandkids. It's really sad. It's out there, and you really have to help protect the person you're taking care of. You got to help protect their assets.
Can I just ask you a question
Sure.
about that?
Mhm.
So in our experience of being geriatric care managers and working with families, we have, and now it makes me wonder if we advise the right thing. We advise them, like if they had caregivers in the home and caregivers maybe are going for groceries and things like that, to do a credit card or load $400 on, say, a Giant account or a Weiss account or something like that, and not give them a debit card, because a debit card essentially could give them lots of access.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. No, that if it's a professional caregiver or somebody that is not part of the family that
Okay.
you're not giving complete control over to, yeah, you definitely might want to just give them a credit card with a very low limit for that prepaid.
Right.
The prepaid credit cards are a little harder to keep going. You have to go through the process of reloading them, and the cost there is a little bit more. There, the fees involved with those can be a little bit more, but certainly a credit card with a very low limit
Okay.
would be something you would want to do to give them the convenience of being able to shop for that person. But you pay attention to that credit card statement when it comes through, and you require that they give you the receipts for that. Okay, I want you charge this. Where's the receipt? I want to see, what was gotten at the grocery store. So those cigarettes and so forth don't start showing up in those things.
You're absolutely right. And we had a situation like that, more than one, but one particularly, where there was a family member looking at the bank statement and seeing the charges going out, but the caregiver wasn't turning in the receipt. And before you know it, alcohol, cigarettes, things like that could be purchased at a grocery store were being purchased. And certainly the client wasn't using any of those products. Yeah.
I mean, it's very, very, very sad at the abuse that goes on with the financial affairs of the vulnerable elderly adult. It's just, it's rampant. And again, as that person who you're going to be, maybe not the physical caregiver, but you're the person that's really going to take care of them, the whole life issue. And that's something you just have to watch out for, because if somebody takes their money, believe me, it will never come back. We went to court to try to get back money stolen by neighbors for one of my clients. I went to the police myself. When I took over, the bank had notified me that something was going on. So I stepped in because I was his power of attorney, where he didn't want me doing anything for him at first. And he says, I'll call you when I need you. So the bank calls me because they knew I had power of attorney. And by the time it was done, I identified at least $40,000 that these neighbors had gotten. I went to the police. They filed a report, went to court 2-3 times. I don't know how many times it was, and never saw a penny of refunded out at all. One of the ladies, I think she pled guilty. The other ones, nothing ever came of it. Don't know what happened there. Jeannie, you probably used to more of that kind of thing. It's just sad. There's no money, no way to get it back, and that's $40,000 that was lost. That could have been used for his care.
Yeah.
So definitely a sad thing. So again, if you identify those assets and you identify the beginning debt, you know what's going on. You can track it all. What's going on? It's like, yeah, here's my bank account. Here's my their investment account, their bank account, and I'm going to pay attention and I'm going to keep track of everything that goes in and out of those accounts. Here's the debt I'm starting out with. I don't want any more debt, and I'm going to pay this debt down as needed. And nothing. I don't want anything else showing up. So I'm going to pay attention to what's going on with their credit also. So you've got that. So that's the part of managing assets. I personally use a little software program. Probably some people heard of it. Quicken. It's just an electronic checkbook. Yeah, there's others out there, but that's how I track. The clients that I take care of. I just keep an electronic checkbook for them. So I keep track of every single penny that goes in and out of their bank account, every single, not transaction per se on the investments, but interest coming in, dividends coming in. If there's anything being sold, that's definitely something that you need to do to make sure that your above and beyond approach of what's going on with your financial affairs. And that's what you want to be. You want to make sure that nobody could question what it is that you're doing. So,
and in reality, if you are doing it that way, you shouldn't care if anybody's looking.
Exactly. It's like, here it is, whatever you want to see, I've got proof for. And you want to keep, I'm sorry, I know a lot of people don't like paper documents, but I have a whole file of here's every invoice that shows what I spent money for this person. I've got paper documents for it. I've got every bank statement. I've got every investment statement. So, I make sure that I cross my T's and dot my I's in that respect. So, the next area, we were going to talk about is, how are we going to pay for things? How are we going to manage that part of it? We've identified the assets. We've identified the liabilities. We've tried to consolidate as much as possible, into as few accounts as possible, because we don't want to have to look at everything, all different things in different banks. I had one lady, she came to me. She knew she was going to have issues. Her health was declining. She wanted me to be power of attorney. And God bless her, she had like 5 different banks. And mostly it was CDs at the banks, but I had like 3 or 4 different checking accounts and so forth. And just kind of tried to consolidate the best I could, with those things. So there was less to keep track of. So now we're going to start managing the money itself. What are we going to do on a regular basis? Well, the first thing you need to do is kind of identify and create a budget. What kind of income do they have coming in? They might have Social Security. They're going to have maybe a pension coming in, maybe an annuity payment coming in. I'm not going to talk about, I'll keep IRAs or investment income a little separate because we have choices on that. But the Social Security, the pension, the annuity, the payments are what the payments are. You're probably not going to get any more or any less based on anything you do. So that's the money coming in. That's our sources. Then we're going to go through and we're going to identify what kind of expenses we have. They might be loan payments, if they still have a home and they're in the home, you're going to have real estate taxes. You're going to have utilities, cable bill, different insurances. You want to make sure you identify all their insurance bills that might be coming in to make sure that we've got that taken care of. So all of those different things. And again, to identify what kind of bills they have, looking through the checkbook, see what's been paid in the past, or looking through a bank statement, see was paid in the past. Get that mail. That mail is going to tell you a whole lot. Bills are going to come in. So you're going to start identifying, is this a legitimate expense? And you're going to start writing down these different bills that you're expecting every month. And again, trying to consolidate. And I also, once I get those bills identified, if I can, I make them electronically. I make all payments and I make them an automatic draft. So they will never be late. I don't have to worry about getting a bill, the regular one, like your utilities, the one you're going to know about, that you feel pretty safe about. We're going to make sure that they're paid every month with as little effort as possible, on the caregiver's part, because they're going to want to concentrate on caring for the person themselves, not having to spend a lot of time on this, taking care of their financial affairs. It's important, but it doesn't have to be a lot of time spent on it. Okay. So you're going to identify all of those expenses and you're going to write those down, add them up. You're going to take what money comes in, you're going to add that up, and then you're going to come up with the difference. This is either going to be, here's what I have left over for their care, or I even have a shortfall in that respect. I've had some people who are living beyond their means just starting out. So, we're going to just identify, okay, these are the money we definitely it comes in every month, and here are the expenses I know I have to pay every month. You can just take an average of utility bills, doesn't have to be exact amounts, just nice, even average amounts. Okay. So then you're going to go and you say, okay, I've got care now that I have to pay for. What can we afford to pay? And what other assets do we have available to start pulling from? And that's the things you're going to start having an IRA, that you can start drawing from. You might have other investments, a nice investment account that is not retirement funds. It's just outside retirement. And maybe you're going to pull some money from that to help fund the shortfall for their regular expenses and or the care that has to be provided. The care might be in-home care, where you have somebody coming into the home, whether it's got to be 24/7 or if it's going to be, just a few days a week to help out, whatever those costs are, or if they have to move into either an assisted living or nursing home, possibly what's the cost going to be there. So how much are we going to have to pull out of those investments every single month? Okay. So that's what I call, my shortfall. I'm going to have to start using my assets to pay the bills. And the other thing is, this is just a quick thing. I won't get into taxes too much, but I wanted to say that whether you pull out of retirement or IRA investments, or you pull out of non-IRA investments, everybody says, oh no, leave the IRA for last because it's taxable. Not necessarily leaving it for last. What you don't want to do is have all these wonderful medical expenses that are deductible or lower tax brackets that are there and available, 10% the lowest bracket, or you even have a standard deduction, if nothing more. We don't want to lose those every year. So sometimes it is good to create some taxable income every year to help use up some of those deductions that are either you deduct them this year or they're just gone. So I can offset some income with these deductions, or I was like, okay, I'll pay 10% tax on it. That's very low. All right. So again, depending on your needs, you might take a mix of money from IRAs and a mix of some from non-IRA money. So always consider that when you're looking at it. And sometimes I look at a long-term plan, maybe a 5-year plan of how we're going to pull assets out and what kind of tax we're going to be looking at. And this is where you may need to contact a professional, to help you through this process, because it can get a little dicey and there's a lot of little things, little nuances that can affect the tax liability. So you just want to make sure that you consider that. And again, unless you've done a lot of tax returns, that might not be something you're versed at, or there might be some tax changes that you just aren't aware of. So, definitely get some help in that area. And it's not a one size fits all. It's going to depend on the person and their financial affairs on what the answer might be. There's no pat answer on that one. So now we've identified all our expenses. We've decided what kind of care we're going to get, in-home care or we're going to do, they're going to move into an assisted living or a nursing home, whatever that is. We've identified now all of our expenses, where our money is coming from, and whatever we have to draw from their current assets. So now we have to make sure that the bills are paid. And again, like I said, if I can make them electronic, I make them electronic. That way I don't have to worry about, oh, I didn't get the invoice. What happened to the invoice? And I forgot to pay it. Oh no, got busy. I was on vacation. Whatever it is, life gets busy. It's taken care of immediately every month. So you've got that. I also create a little grid. Some of my clients don't have a whole lot. By the time they're in assisted living, there's not a whole lot of bills to pay. So I create a little grid of months and then what bill. And as it's done each month, I just check it off. So I know nothing has been forgotten. Okay. So that's just a little tidbit tip there to be able to handle, make sure things are being taken care of when you're taking care of someone else's affairs. The other thing you might want to remember is you need to take care of the assets they have. So if they have a house, make sure the house is taken care of. Make sure that the insurance is paid, the real estate taxes are paid, that the repairs are being done, that there isn't leaky faucets and things like that are going to cause damage to the home. If there's nobody living in the home, you really need to consider selling it. Don't hold on to it if there's no hope that person will ever come back. Get rid of it. There's nothing worse than a house sitting empty and being neglected. The value of the home will deteriorate. It will go down if you let it sit there and no one living in it and no one caring for it. It's best if the person will never come back. I know it's difficult, but go ahead and sell the home and then put the assets in investments. So that's the big thing. The other thing is I really don't advise anybody to try to do investment management themselves. You do need a professional. You need somebody you can rely on that can understand the risk tolerance, the age risk, the cash needs of what to invest in. And a good broker can do that and do it successfully. They know you need somebody that understands that. It's like, yeah, I can't be risky with this money, but I also have to do a little bit better than CDs, because we all know you might as well not invest it. If you're going to invest in CDs nowadays, you don't get anything. So you have to have a little bit of mix there to make them maybe a little bit of money, but still trying to keep something at least keep up with inflation in that respect. And a good broker, a professional one, will certainly be able to help you with that. Don't try to do it yourself unless that's what you do for a living. Same way with insurance. Contact a good insurance broker that can make sure that person has all the proper insurances, that they should have. Probably they're already there, but do they need to be reevaluated, especially if you still have the home and you have what you need in that respect. So, that's as far as, just trying to, manage the assets you have. Then just trying to decide if you have to go to a home, or they have to go to a home, they have to go to a nursing home or an assisted living facility, or we're looking at maybe that 24/7 long-term care. If you've got that, those options to look at, the things you're going to have to pay attention to is what can they afford? If I've got, $20,000 in the bank, that they've got $20,000 in the bank, they're going to run out of money really quick. I'm going to have to start looking at some issues. Maybe I have $200,000, but, they're still fairly young, but, and it's the mind, not the body, that we have issues with. They could still live a long time. So I'm looking at, well, even $200,000 isn't a lot of money when I'm talking about somebody who might be living, 5 to 10 years, with these needs. So again, it's going to depend on the person. It's going to depend on what they have that might dictate what kind of choices you're going to have to make on their long-term care. The other thing is do they have long-term care insurance? By the time they're to this point, you can't get long-term care insurance. So it's not something you're going to make a choice about getting. But if they have it, what kind of benefits does it offer? Some of the policies that were written earlier were really, really generous. The insurance companies realized that, well, no, can't be that generous. we're going to put some dollar limit on it or a time limit. So you want to look and see what that is. So, if they're just in an assisted living facility and you see that we might be in an assisted living facility for a while, but then we know we're going to have to go into a nursing and there's only 24 months worth of benefits. Maybe you wait a little bit longer till the possibility of being in a nursing facility where the costs are a lot higher. So that long-term care insurance can be a bigger benefit for you. Sometimes it's a guessing game, but again, you just have to make some decisions about that and look and see what's going on as far as health and the life expectancy of the person. Don't want to be morbid. Again, like Jeannie was saying, sometimes you just have to think of those morbid issues. When do I think that they're going to pass? It's something hard to look at. And the other thing is does that facility, does it look like we're going to run out of funds soon? If they have millions of dollars, don't worry, put them in a really nice place and let them enjoy the last couple of years of their lives. But if they're going to, if they're going to run out of money soon, you may want to look at a facility that will accept Medicaid, or they have some other benevolent fund. There are a couple of facilities here. If you have a minimum amount of X amount of dollars, they will accept you. If you run out of money, the benevolent fund will allow you to continue to live there. So, you've got those options, but you may have to make an option of, will you take Medicaid when they run out of money? If they don't, then you got to make a decision. Do I move them out to try to find a facility when they do have to qualify for Medicaid? Or do I just put them in a Medicaid qualifying facility to begin with? So, those again are choices. Some people say, well, I don't want to have to move them because that can be traumatic, for an elderly person. Once you get them into a facility, that's traumatic. But then to say, oh, now we have to move you someplace else, sometimes that's worse. So you may want to just make that decision. Let's just put them over here. It's not as nice. Maybe it may still just be as nice, but I'm going to look and see if that facility takes Medicaid patients. So those are, again, the things that you want to look at, when you're looking at your long-term care options. Not only what type of care they're going to get or what type of care they need, but how are you going to pay for it? How long is the money going to last? And to be able to pay for that. So, we've got that. The biggest thing, I've got the things that you said to kind of wrap things up. So I will, kind of stop right there. And then I just have a few other things that maybe after, if there's any questions, I'll give those.
I'm taking there aren't any questions because Kurt hasn't joined back in. And since we are, this has just been so valuable to hear some of this information again for me, but also hopefully that the people listening or people who are going to view this in the weeks, and months to come, that they really can take some of this advice to heart. We all have acknowledged these are difficult conversations, but unfortunately death is a part of life. And so if we don't plan well, then our outcomes of those last years may be very different than what we thought they were going to be, and could ultimately end up costing more money, could end up causing more stress for our caregivers and our loved ones. So I think that all of this advice that both of you have offered today is so valuable for people. I think in our own situation where I was kind of chuckling to myself, Cynthia, when you were saying about finding about the 5 banks and things like that. I think we all probably can relate to somebody we know who even used coffee cans and put it behind bricks in their cellars and things like that, because they didn't necessarily trust banks, because they lived through the Depression and a time when they couldn't get their money out of a bank. And I've also heard that from clients. That's why they do use 5 banks, because I guess they figure they'll beat it to one bank before the other bank doesn't have the money. So I think it's really helpful too, knowing some of these things about the generation that you're taking care of and being involved with, and yeah, that idea they're just going to live on forever, and that doesn't happen. So, we plan vacations, we plan our kids' college, we plan all these other things. So it only would make sense that we would plan the financial and legal aspects of our long-term care. So with that, I would just say, if you could offer up one last thing, we have 5 minutes left to go. If you could just offer up your last tidbit, your last takeaway with the audience of, if you're going to do anything, make sure you do this. One or two things that really can make a difference.
Well, I'll go ahead since I just finished. I'll just like, my big thing is keep good records. Just keep good records and reevaluate what their assets are. You know, look at that budget, you know, make sure you know when they're going to run out of money, because Medicaid planning, you need to have, you know, some idea if that's coming up, and to make, you know, start making those plans before they run out of money. So just knowing what's going to happen financially.
Great. Jeannie.
Yeah, and I'm just going to tag something onto that. You know, I tell clients that they really need to start doing the planning 12 to 18 months before they think they're going to run out of money. And then they really have to start the Medicaid application process 6 months before they're going to run out of money. For anybody who hasn't gone through that process, there's work that's involved. You need 5 years worth of bank statements, you know, all kinds of personal stuff, you know, DD 214s if they were a vet, birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates, you know, stuff that takes time to accumulate. And in many cases, we have to go back to the state agencies to request copies, or we have to go to the banks to request copies, and all of that takes time. And then the Medicaid application piece itself takes time. And I agree with Cindy that one of the most important questions you want to ask the facility is, are they a Medicaid eligible facility? Because not only is it traumatic for the individual, particularly if they're suffering from dementia, to have to move, but your options for moving from a non-Medicaid facility to a Medicaid facility are greatly limited. And while the quality of the nursing home facilities in Washington County has improved significantly in the last decade or so, there's still a few that you probably would not want your family member to have to go to. And they are typically the beds that are available if you are going from a non-Medicaid facility to a Medicaid facility. Once you're in a Medicaid facility, if you're private pay, they can't kick you out if you're going to convert. So sometimes it's better to pay a little bit more upfront and know that you've got a good bed waiting for you when you need it, than to try and penny pinch and end up someplace where you really don't want your family member to have to be. But, you know, my takeaways are you really want to have the documents in place. You would like as much information as possible. But, you know, again, I've got an 83-year-old father, so I recognize that generation doesn't share information well. But we've at least now stressed to him the importance of his keeping good records and keeping them in one spot in the house, so that if something does happen, we've got a starting point and we're not digging through, you know, the 4,000 square foot house trying to figure out which drawer the bank statements might be in. And clients, and I tell families that they need to be realistic about this. Just about every family that walks in my door says, well, we're going to keep mom and dad at home as long as possible. You know, and I had one wife, she maybe weighed 100 pounds soaking wet. Husband was 250 pounds with limited mobility. And she's like, well, I'm going to keep him home. I think I can provide care for him at home. You know, there's no possible way that she can provide care for him at home. And it took a little bit for the family to kind of get their head wrapped around that mom caring for dad in the house on her own was not a realistic expectation. But it's hard.
Yeah.
You know, we all want everybody to stay in their house as long as they can, as long as it's safe for everybody. But as soon as it's not safe for somebody, and often it's not safe for the healthy spouse, you know, then we need to go to plan B.
Great advice. I just want to end with one thing, since it is Veterans Day, and you brought up about the DD 214. I know that we have so many times that generation, they are very private. They're even private about what they experienced in war. They don't look at, sometimes I deserve anything back for that. And when I was doing my graduate work in geriatric care management, my husband's grandfather allowed me to interview him. And it was the first time anybody in the family heard anything about his war experience. And I documented all of that and gave that to the family when he passed on. So sometimes we can approach these really difficult conversations in very gentle ways. It's just, you know, how we go about that sometimes, but certainly veterans are, you know, so appreciated. And sometimes they're really eligible for more things than what they ever realize.
Yeah.
So I think we're
Anybody-
at our time, Kurt, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Thank you both. This was such a pleasure, and hopefully the audience and, like I said, the people in the future to view this really get a lot from it. So thank you very much.